Hey everybody, Brian the Brain here, and I am hosting this month's theme. It is Mario March Madness, and we are slowly anticipating the arrival of the Mario movie on April 7th, and we're very excited for that. But we wanted to spend the month of March trying to, kind of reflect at the history of Mario and the media and how, I don't know, how we ended up with that 1993 movie. I just don't know how, but we're going to try to figure that out along the way. My name is Brian the Brain. You can find me on Twitter at Brian the Brain. My co-host is Jerome C. 1985 on Twitter, Jerome Cuson. We appreciate you listening to the show, and we hope you can give us a 4 or 5 star review to the people at the Real World to kind of help more people find the shows that we're doing here at the Real World. And yeah, this week is going to be interesting because we're watching an anime that wasn't even released in the United States. It's called Super Mario Bros. The Great Mission to Rescue Princess Peach. And yeah, this was made in '86, and it's actually one of the first, because technically there was another animated movie that came out the same day as like a double feature that was also based on the video game, but this is technically the first movie adaptation of a video game. And it was actually released in theaters in Japan. And yeah, surprisingly, this never came to America. And I don't know why, but we kind of possibly discussed that with some subtle racial things going on. But yeah, Jerome, I know you're not really a big fan of like anime, but you gotta admit, like this soundtrack plus the colors and the animation, this was a bop in anime for 1986.
So unfortunately, we had to watch this on a crappy YouTube version. I would love to see like a fully remastered version of this, maybe even with a dub, because I would just like to see it in its full glory. I think we got a pretty good sense of this, and it's funny. I watched this, and I think there were parts of it that were very enjoyable. I'm not going to say that it was a masterpiece, but it was a pleasant way to spend an hour. And then I watched what we were supposed to watch for next week, some of the Mario animated shows, and it made me fully appreciate what I was watching with this anime. So there are definitely some elements that I think that are very good, and there are some things that perhaps don't work nearly as well. Again, I really wish that we had a fully realized like 4K Blu-ray or 4K version of this, because I would love to see this in terms of like how maybe you would have seen it in 1986, or seeing it better from a technical standpoint. But I will say this was never unpleasant to watch, and I can't say that was true for the Super Mario animated shows.
For sure, but you mentioned like the 4K. There's like a 4K restoration that I watch, but it's not exactly full 4K because YouTube can't really do that. I don't think, at least yet. But the guy who was able to take the original 16 millimeter scan of the film and upload it and restore it, his name is, well, he goes by Carnival on Twitter. Stian Schultz. Yeah, credit to him because apparently the rumor is, I don't know if this is true, but he spent like 20 grand out of his own money to restore it. Credit to him because that's a passionate thing to do for the fans, and then he uploaded it on YouTube. But again, like it's supposed to be 4K. I don't know if it's exactly 4K, but the version that I watched was definitely very very clear compared to some of the other clips that I saw of the original from on past YouTube videos. So credit to him for doing that for all the fans because it's got a lot of views, and you got to look at the comments because people are either shocked that they never knew this existed, and then they're like talking about the actual movie itself and getting that twist ending that we'll talk about. So there's a lot of things going on with this movie, but of course they had tie-ins in Japan. You know what I mean? Like, so the production company is called Grouper Productions, and they teamed up with Nintendo to do this anime. And of course they had like advertisements and tie-ins. There was an art book, a picture book, the soundtrack on vinyl, which you can find not the whole thing, but select songs from the vinyl on YouTube with artwork from the vinyl front cover. It's really awesome. And yeah, there was rice containers, watches, phone cards, because phone cards are a big thing in Japan. So yeah, a lot of tie-ins, and yet surprisingly, nothing came to the United States. And later on, it was released on VHS and Betamax in Japan, but later on, like some of those copies were kind of like gone. So to find a hard copy of this movie is super expensive, and yeah, it's gonna be rare that you even find this movie as a hard copy on VHS or something like that, because it's gonna be several $100s for sure. And you mentioned a restoration or like a re-release. I hope they do that, but I don't know who owns the rights to this or whatever because it's free on YouTube right now. But it's not dubbed. It's not dubbed. It's all subtitled. But if you're one of those people that don't like to read subtitles, I feel bad for you because that means I guess you're so lazy that you're ignoring stop signs on the street because you can't read them. So anyway, I mentioned before that this was released the same day as another video game movie called Writing Boy Star Soldier's Secret. Never played that game in my life, but the idea of a double feature, because this is an hour movie, like that makes sense. Like a double feature, 1 hour movies each for anime. That fits with kids, man, because a kid has a short attention span. So I think a double feature of anime like kind of works. So I don't know if that's a regular thing in Japan, but I'm kind of shocked we never had that in like the United States. I know we had serials in the 30s and 40s, but I don't know why they never brought this kind of concept back, a double feature of 1 hour movies. But anyway, so Luigi in this movie has a yellow shirt, and we were very confused, and like a purple like overall, kind of changes colors sometimes. I was thinking that, or maybe in the original game, that like we just kind of misinterpreted the colors because it was 80s pixels. But no, he was green in the original game, so I don't know why they did this decision. No one knows. And if you look at like the cover art for some of the like the Vita and the VHS and the soundtrack, they put him in a red shirt, so it's very confusing. But I don't know what they were going for, but it kind of stuck out. But it's one of those things that kind of like is one of those lore of Mario. And then later on the Wii U when they released Super Smash Brothers, that version of Luigi has an alternate costume with that colorway. So they're kind of acknowledging their history, which is cool. And we could talk about that with the twist ending. But yeah, this seems to have like all the elements from the original game, which is awesome. So like it's got the original like soundtrack as music, plus the soundtrack that came with it with the cool rock songs that they attached to it. Plus, like they used the original sound effects from the game. So overall, I think the idea of coming together with a 1 hour Mario special and it's animated, it's like, yeah, let's get the original music, let's get the original sound effects, original character designs, except Luigi apparently, and let's just have some fun with it. And overall, I think that was the best decision because if you compare this to the live action movie that was going to come out years later, the whole structure is completely different. Yet somehow within this 1 hour structure, they're able to tell a Mario story. And for some reason, the live action movie couldn't do that.
Well, it's so weird to me. I feel like I wish we could go back to a time when we could do like instead of a 2 hour Disney movie or a 90-minute Disney movie, like have two 1 hour Disney movies. And the problem is that I mean our brains are broken and apparently we can't focus on two things at once. But I think it'd be really cool to go to a situation where it's like, okay, you're not going to see one 2 hour feature. You're going to see two 1 hour movies played back to back, and it's going to be a fun, like short double feature. And I know that you go to some of like there's specialty screenings that do that. You've got your horror movie marathons because so many of those movies are like 80 to 90 minutes. But I wish we could get to a point where we would do this. I think the thing about this anime that is so weird to me is that it is both of a place within like my conception of the Mario universe, especially the specific references they make with the music and some of the characters. But it's also kind of a bizarre, like Toad is completely bizarre in this version of the story. I also want to point out that even though it was an anime, Brian, the underwater music still gave me some goosebumps and gave me hives. I don't know if you had that same feeling too.
Well, here's the problem, and this is kind of where we're going to go into our nostalgic look back at video gaming and Nintendo. I sucked at the Mario games, but I was good at like the Mario off-brand titles like Mario Kart, the baseball game that came out on GameCube. I'm playing currently right now, like there's a basketball game I discovered on the Nintendo DS that came out 10 years ago that I'm still playing on handheld. So all the offshoot Mario games I'm good at, but the actual Mario titles I was never good at. I didn't even know you could run until like college, like holding down the A button and running through the level. I didn't know that existed. So the whole time when I was a kid, I was just literally pressing the right arrow button and moving slowly through the levels. And no wonder I couldn't beat like the first three levels. I would get past the first two and just kind of fuck up. And yeah, that's kind of my story with the Mario games. I love the offshoot other brand stuff, and yeah, like bring me back the Mario baseball game. I've heard rumors about bringing that back. Bring me a Switch game with basketball, just like the DS game. Give me those kind of games. But see, I never got so far to hear that music, is what I'm saying, because I suck so bad.
All I'm gonna say is that the Mario game, especially when you get to the eighth level, is very hard. How long did it take you to realize that you could skip to level 4 in the 1-2 section? How long did that take you?
When YouTube came out, and I found the video. So there you
That
go.
so it took you that long to realize that you could jump to the 4th level.
Dude, I was not good at the original Mario games. It was just like I remember like after school programs when they hooked up the Nintendo or the Super Nintendo, and I would be one of those people just watching and be like, "How the fuck did you do that? And how are you jumping on that thing while it's moving?" And yeah, so I just kind of became like a Mario spectator. But once Mario Kart came out on the 64, that was my like Mario game. Like I was really
I
good at
feel
that.
like that Mario Kart is especially important because that is not like a Mario game, and I think the racing part of it really helps. So it's really strange to me. In 2023, we are getting 2 movies of really long-term IP characters that have almost no characteristics beyond their professions. Mario is one of them. He's been a doctor, tennis star, basketball player, racer, plumber. Like he's done all this thing. And then later on, we're going to have Barbie, who has also had all these occupations, but doesn't really have a defined character. So it's really interesting to me that in 2023, we have mined the IP well so much, but we haven't really crossed this threshold. Yes, there have been some Barbie animated specials and some TV shows, but that's not the same as a fully realized movie. And of course, Mario, we've got the 1993 movie, which has its own issues, but we haven't had like a proper animated Mario movie, and it's very surprising to me that we haven't. So this is kind of a rare glimpse like this in the TV shows. Now the TV shows are also pretty available on YouTube, but again, in terms of like official releases where you can find them easily on a streaming service, it's just it doesn't exist. So despite the popularity of Mario, there have been very, very few interpretations of the character beyond the video games, and that's what I think is so. And that's one of the reasons that I think it's good that we are exploring this anime, and also because I'm convinced that the movie is going to make direct reference to this anime in some way. I don't know what it's going to be. You and I were speculating. There's a point when Bowser gets turned into a teddy bear, like that might be a reference, but it's going to happen.
Yeah, because I mean, there's no way that the makers of that movie didn't watch this and get some kind of inspiration. That'd be like if Peter Jackson never watched the animated Lord of the Rings and went on to make Lord of the Rings. You know what I mean? Like he took a lot of influence from the those animated Lord of the Rings movies from the 70s and 80s. So I fully expect that here. So let's kind of get into the story. And I mentioned before they do a Mario story within an hour, and it's not that hard once you kind of break it down because hey, let's just make it like The Hobbit, and then we can do a 1 hour story. Because if you look at the structure of The Hobbit, call to action, refusal of the call, you accept the call, you go on the journey for the second act, and then the third act you save the day by killing the dragon or King Koopa or whatever. It's not that hard to structure, but for some reason the '93 movie wanted to do this alt-world thing with like dinosaurs. So that's we'll talk about that when we get to that final episode. But the story starts out with Mario playing his Famicom, and of course, it wasn't Nintendo in Japan, or it wasn't the NES. It was the Famicom, and it's a different design. Plays the same, except when they brought it to America, they changed the design. And if you want to kind of learn more about that, I suggest watch High Scores on Netflix. One of those first episodes kind of covered this, the history of Nintendo and the rise of the NES. So I recommend checking that out. But he's playing the game, and this is kind of becoming a trope in kind of like animes and video game movies and cartoons and such, where the character gets sucked into the game, and that's what happened here. Well, actually, it's backwards because Princess Peach breaks out of the TV and goes to Mario's like, "Help me, save me!" And then Koopa comes out of the TV and then takes her back in, and then the whole time Mario is thinking like, was this real? Was this a hallucination?" Luigi thinks he's crazy, but the thing is, Mario has Princess Peach's necklace, so it was real. So that then the next day he's just kind of like, "How do I get back to her? How do I get back to her?" Even when they're at work, and he's just totally distracted. It's a funny scene because this woman comes in and they're working at a grocery store, and the woman's giving this list of like things, and I don't know if they purposely changed the subtitle to make it a joke or not, but Mario was completely putting the wrong things in the bag and just got slapped for it. And that was a good joke. And then all of a sudden this dog comes in and takes the necklace away, and then they chase the dog. And the dog leads into this pipe, and they go into the pipe, and they're back in the video game world. So that's how we got the call to action, and I thought that was really fun. A good way to do it. And all of a sudden they meet this like hermit that looks like Gandalf, and I'm just gonna call him Gandalf because they didn't give him a name. So I'm just gonna keep
Mushroom Gandalf is what you can call him.
Mushroom Gandalf is what we're gonna call him. And he's given the layout of the whole story. Like he's got to Mario and Luigi have to save Princess Peach because there's this spell that Bowser put upon the land, and in order to release the spell from the land, you got to rescue Princess Peach. And the funny part is this made me laugh. It was so random. They're getting married on Friday the 13th, which is the next day, and I was like, oh. Friday the 13th, like what a date to pick. And I guess, hey, that's kind of like we're in the middle of like the Jason craze in the 80s. We're at what, 86? So we're at the sixth movie by now or something like that. So yeah, the Friday the 13th craze was kind of like, influencing animes in the 80s. So there you go. So basically Gandalf tells him, hey, you got to defeat Bowser, but on the way to the castle, you can pick up these three items, power-ups to power you up: the mushroom, the flower, and the star. And when he said this, I marked out. I geeked out. I don't know about you, but I was like, wow, they're using elements of the show or the game that actually makes sense for you to defeat the bad guy at the end. And from that point on, I was like, okay, they got it. They're doing the Hobbit. They even got a Gandalf. I'm in with this. How are you feeling about this opening, Jerome?
This is very much like a road trip movie, even though it's like anime and it's not like it's clearly going for a very specific kind of vibe that we've seen in like other movies and animated shows. Like it's a video game quest, which makes sense. This is based off of a video game. Again, the fact that the mushroom Gandalf, like it's clearly meant to look like Gandalf. Like let's not, even though it's 1986, like clearly this is the vibe that we are going for, and I think it works. Like the thing that I would compare this to is like if you watch this compared to Super Mario Brothers, like the upcoming movie, not the live action one. Like I think with this upcoming movie, like you're going to get a more pure interpretation of the characters and whatnot, and probably in keeping more with the spirit of the video game. And I think there are parts of this short that do a very good job of providing some context to the characters and whatnot. But this is like the equivalent of like a Star Wars Visions, where there's things that are a little bit off too. Like you don't like the mushrooms. Yes, they're important, but obviously because of Japanese culture and Asian culture in general, mushrooms take on a much more significant importance, like that you see in this movie. The other thing that I would point out is that Luigi is very greedy in this movie, and it's really bizarre. Like I don't recall Luigi. Luigi's just kind of a dick. Like all he wants is gold. All he wants is the money. He doesn't care about Peach at all. Like he is being very selfish throughout, and he doesn't. Does he learn a moral lesson at the end of it? Because I don't think he does.
He does not have an arc. All he wants is the gold, which if you kind of picture Charlie Day as this version of Luigi, then it kind of fits because Charlie Day is kind of like that asshole from Always Sunny. So I get that, but it's just weird that they had this interpretation of Luigi. I don't know, because he's not a hero in this version. He is not a hero at all.
He is absolutely not a hero. Like it's almost weird. Like it's almost out of character. Like Mario, it feels like even though he's not a plumber, he's a grocer in this movie. So like it's very different, and that's cool. But it was just weird that Luigi didn't learn any sort of lesson about like, okay, maybe you shouldn't always go for money and shouldn't always chase gold. Like it's very, very strange. I guess that might also be an American way of thinking about it, because it feels like every American movie or TV show has to have this moral lesson to it. But again, if this is an anime for kids, like you would think, like even a lot of Miyazaki movies, like very clearly have a lesson or some thematic elements. So it's very strange.
Yeah, so the second act is just really like it goes really fast because there's a lot of things that go on, and they meet a lot of different characters to the point where it's just so fast that you don't realize, oh shit, that's the character, like that's Latiku or whatever. Yeah, so they're basically looking for the mushroom at first, and they find like I don't know, all these different mushrooms, and Luigi starts eating them, and at first he's like, no, first he's laughing his ass off, and then he's crying when he eats a different mushroom, and then he's sad when he eats a different mushroom, and then all of a sudden all three mushrooms start affecting him at the same time. So I was like, oh my god, they're really doing like a drug trip here. And I was like, why are these mushrooms such a thing? And then Jerome texted me this article about mushrooms in Japanese culture and the significance of it all. So I was like, okay, I get it. They're really into mushrooms. They're really putting an emphasis on it. And then I don't think I've ever seen this in a Mario game or whatever, but like the mushrooms come alive and they become mushroom people, and they're just thanking Mario and Luigi for saving them, even though it's all Mario. But yeah, I guess they were freed from like their spell that Bowser put on them, and they turned them into like actual mushrooms. But they're actually mushroom people that are like citizens of the kingdom. So that was really interesting. And then they go on to do a giant bird gimmick. That was interesting. um, so they got the mushrooms. They meet Latiku, the guy on the flying cloud. And it reminds me of Dragon Ball because Dragon Ball took this as well, like Flying Nimbus, like took it straight up from the Mario game, and it looks like they took it from the anime as well because the structure of the Nimbus Cloud in Dragon Ball is the same way. You get on it, you're moving around, it makes weird noises, and the science behind it all makes no sense because it causes it to rain, and it causes it like to do fire. I don't know. It was just very strange stuff going on, and it basically led to the piranha plants, which led to them finding another power up, the flower. And eventually they get imprisoned as well. And then there's this one moment where Mario's having this like Pixar sad song montage in his head about finding Princess Peach or whatever. And I was like, oh my God, they're doing a Pixar montage out of nowhere. And, you know, they break out. Yeah. And basically Luigi thinks he got all this gold, but it turns out it was just a trick. And when he empties out his bag, it's all like rocks and shit like that. So that was pretty funny. His greed is kind of getting to him. And then once they get all three power ups, it's like, okay, we're set. Let's go. Let's go to the castle. And all of a sudden, they're on this flying ship that is flying for no reason at all. Again, this is like the weird parts of the anime. It's a flying ship, and they arrive at Bowser's castle. But there's one scene that really stood out for us, Jerome, that we were talking about, and it's when Princess Peach is interacting with Koopa in the castle, and she nearly traps him by tricking him because I guess Bowser can just transform. So she's like, "Can you transform into a teddy bear?" And she traps him as a teddy bear, and then he breaks out. But credit to Princess Peach for being kind of a smart badass, try to break out, even though by the end of it she's kind of relying on Mario. But this is kind of what I want Anna Taylor-Joy to do: is kind of outsmart Bowser a little bit. What do you think?
I think that's exactly what's going to happen. I don't know how much of the marketing material that you've seen, but it is heavily implied that Princess Peach is the one in charge and that Mario is kind of incompetent. I think we're going to get, and I can't help but make this connection because of the fact that Christopher Pratt was, of course, in the Lego movie. It feels like we're going to get a kind of a similar vibe. That's the impression I'm getting from the marketing material. I may be wrong on that, but so we'll have to see how right I am about that. But yeah, it's a very fun scene, especially for 1986. Like to have Princess Peach like try to almost outsmart Bowser. Like clearly he was able to transform, but like it was a really nice thought, and I appreciated the effort if nothing else. So this was it was a very fun little scene, and Princess Peach in general, when she is not shouting Mario, and I'm not gonna do it here because I think it would be racist to do so, but the way that she shouts Mario is definitely something that I will remember from this in a humorous way. And yeah, I think the second act, it takes a while for this to get going, but then once the second act hits, it just things just kind of fly by.
Yeah, and I guess we can kind of mention the voices here, the voice acting. Like, I think one of the issues in the and we'll talk about it in next week's episode, is when Captain Lou Albano does the voice of Mario. It's too low tone, and I think Mario works at like not necessarily a high pitch tone, but like somewhere near the top where you can kind of bring it down a little bit. But I think that's what the issue was for Captain Lou Albano. He's a good live action older Mario, but not a voice acting Mario. And I think they got it right here, where the voices are slightly like high pitched, but not too high pitched where you're annoyed, and you kind of get that maxed out with like Princess Peach and her voice. But I think this version of Mario and Luigi is at the right level, and Luigi just laughing all the time really works. I think so. I like that aspect of the voice acting, And I like Bowser because the guy was just doing this like dragon, like reptilian type voice that made it sound so cynical. But then he can change his tone to like when he changed it to the teddy bear, he changed to this playful tone. But then when he broke out of the box, he was back to that mean tone again. So that was some good voice work there. So we go to the third act, and they're at Koopa's castle. It's the night of the wedding, and everyone's excited. And she's on the stage with Bowser, and Bowser's like, "Do you say yes, my love?" And she's like not answering. And of course, she's just stalling because there's no way that she's marrying this dude. So finally, Mario and Luigi show up. There's some hijinks and antics going on, some struggles. Eventually, they're in some kind of like, I don't know, lower layer pit level something, like torture room or something. And eventually, Mario kind of puts some of the elements together and kind of destroys the castle and becomes super overpowered because he's got the flower now, combined with the star, combined with the mushroom, and he's like jacked, and he grows a few feet just like the game, and he pretty much handles Bowser like really easily. And I guess this idea of Bowser being thrown by his tail grew into what it would become in Nintendo 64. Again, I didn't get so far in the 64 game, barely played the first level and can figure it out, but I watched other people play. But yeah, so when you throw Bowser by the tail in 64, I guess that came from this because he's thrown by the tail here. And not only that, are you familiar with Team Rocket, Jerome?
I'm not.
Okay, so Team Rocket are the bad guys in the Pokemon anime and the game or whatever. And every time they lose, something happens where there's an explosion or they get thrown by a Pokemon to the point where they're thrown across the, like almost off camera, and you see like a lens flare in the corner or something like dink. You know what I mean? And that they did it here, and I was like, "Oh shit! Is this the start of that? Was this a trope that was like developed, and then it became a trope for later animes? Because Bowser is thrown across, I don't know, God knows where, and there's a little lens flare as if where he lands. So that little trope in animation, not just anime, but like modern animation, I've seen it before. I don't know if it comes from this, but I love that, and I love seeing the characters thrown across like thousands of feet away to just becoming like a barely noticeable like falling star almost. So I love that trope, and they did it here. And then we get the twist ending. It's everyone's happy. Mario's happy. He rescues Princess Peach, but the big reveal is that the dog transforms back into a human, and we find out that the dog is a prince from a neighboring kingdom, and he was the one who was originally engaged to Princess Peach. So what do? They do the Pretty in Pink ending. They do the Pretty in Pink ending, and yeah, Ducky, aka Mario, doesn't get the girl, but he's mature enough to accept it, which I was in shock, and I was like, man, what a heartbreaker. And this kind of put it over the top for me. I was originally going to give this a 6.5 out of 10, but that ending made me give it a 7 because I was like, God, I know we've all been there some way, somehow, of like kind of just being not the cuck, but just being played a little bit. Like, hey, rescue me, and I'll kind of be a girlfriend or whatever. And no, it just turns out she was already taken, and she was used by Mario, or Mario was used by Princess Peach, and Luigi just ends up with Colt. So there you go. But Mario's kind of sad. It's a sad ending, but a realistic ending.
I guess in some ways, like they don't really have a lot in common, so I think it would be very, very difficult for them to come together on anything else besides like having the rescue in common. Mario's reaction is mature. It is a twist. I think the issue that I have with it is that it is in no way hinted at all that this dog may be a prince. I think that's the biggest problem. Like, it would have been nice to have had like some idea of what was going on, and specifically, like, it is implied that they are both dreaming about each other and like dancing at a wedding of some sort. I mean, that's kind of the implication. So it's weird. Like, I don't necessarily mind that this is the direction they went in, but it's just a little weird to me that they in no way set it up so that Princess was going to go with her prince. And yeah, I mean, I don't have an issue with the ending except for the fact that it literally came out of nowhere. And yeah, very much it was very similar to Pretty in Pink in a lot of ways, which is funny because Pretty in Pink came out the same year as this anime did. I don't think that there was any influence from either side on it, but it is amusing that they both came out in the same year.
Yeah, and the whole idea of like class structure in Pretty in Pink kind of plays out here because she ends up with the rich guy. So it is what it is, and his name is Prince Haru, and he's never appeared since. So which makes me think like, okay, you talk about there's got to be a reference to the anime in the next upcoming movie, and we were talking about the teddy bear, which they can recreate that scene. But I'm thinking they're going to bring in Prince Haru, and that's going to be the twist. But he might not end up with Princess Peach. I think she might just end up on her own or whatever. But yeah, don't be surprised if we get this Prince Haru guy in the movie.
So what you're saying is it's going to be like a Shrek or Frozen situation where the prince is there, but they're actually evil.
Something. There's got to be something because there's no way you do all this research and find out a character that existed only in the anime to not bring that character back and in the actual upcoming live action or animated movies. This is like I don't know. It just seems like too perfect of a story for an arc to do that. So that's what I'm expecting in the upcoming movie. And I've talked about this character with some of my friends of mine, and they never heard of this guy at all. And they're bigger Mario heads than I am. So that goes to show you this character is so obscure. It's so unique that that seems like the perfect thing to bring into the animated movie. So um, I guess we can talk about the strengths now, like the music and the sound effects from the game. Great choices, and of course you got the soundtrack, the four songs they selected, which you kind of heard at the beginning of this episode, some samples of it. Some really good bopping beats, you know what I mean, and it's fun. And a lot of these animes from that time, even going to the '90s, even to today, I'd say some of them have good, like fun soundtracks. You know what I mean, like cool soundtracks that kind of get you emotionally invested in the beginning and the opening credits. Dragon Ball's been doing that forever, and I love almost every single Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Kai theme that they've come up with over the 30 years span or whatever. So credit to the soundtrack. Um, I like the fact that this was an hour, it's short and to the point. If this was 90 minutes, I think it would have been too much. But because it's an hour, and they, like I said, that second act was just going, 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 like nonstop, and they got a lot done in that I don't know 40-minute span of the movie. Credit to them for doing that because again, it's so they simplified it. You know what I mean? They took the Hobbit and just it's just like okay, we're gonna do the Hobbit, but for Mario, which is pretty much the structure of the game anyway. It's like a call to action, defeat the bad guy at the end instead of a dragon. It's Bowser, and that works. But somehow the '93 movie just went completely off that and wanted to do like a sci-fi channel thing, and that of course did not work. But we'll talk about that in the coming weeks. But I think the short and sweet version of this works a lot better in terms of the story. And of course, we got that Pretty in Pink ending, which is so like realistic because Mario just you got to see it because Mario's reaction is just like the most human thing in the whole movie. It's just him accepting the fact that he, sometimes you just can't, can't force people to love you, and some people are just.
It's like that moment from the Mario trailer where he goes like, and is like holding his heart. It's like seeing that, except 40 years earlier.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's perfect. That's exactly what it was. That's exactly what it was. So the weakness is, not all the jokes land. Obviously, there are some subtle racist things like Mario getting a sombrero on and doing like a mariachi dance because he was happy.
What the fuck was that?
I think this is a thing
that was
that
so weird.
This happens a lot in like animes from this time because they're not as culturally sensitive as they are now. But I've seen some stuff in like there's this wrestling anime, um, Ultimate Muscle. It's what it's called, or Muscle Bomber or whatever. And there's some racist characters in that was like, holy shit! There's no way they could show this in America, and they didn't obviously that show. But I was watching and I was like, oh my God, you got animated Terry Funk here standing next to this caricature of a black person. Like, oh my God, this is bad. But it's a thing that occurs in a lot of these animes at the time, and it's kind of like something you got to acknowledge. Um, yeah, because there's a lot of cultural insensitive things that go on in animes in '80s and '90s, and they've kind of gone back on that. Like another example from Dragon Ball is this Mr. Popo character who's just like completely like almost like blackface, even though he's supposed to be a black character. He came off as blackface. In some countries, they had to change his color because it came off so offensive. So it's just this thing that some of the animators in Japan just don't pick up on until it's too late, and it's just a cultural thing, and it's unfortunate. But you got that example with that sombrero wearing Mario in this one, so there you go. And of course, Luigi being greedy, that kind of doesn't work for us Mario fans because we're so used to seeing him as a hero, especially if you played Luigi's Mansion. And that's a Mario game that I can get into because it's very like It's well structured, and you're not jumping on like high angles or whatever, and that game works for me because it's just a haunted house gimmick. So seeing Luigi not being a hero was kind of off-putting, but that's kind of where I am in terms of the strengths and weaknesses. I'm pretty sure we're on the same page almost.
I would say so. I think we're pretty much in sync on everything really. I don't really have a lot of disagreement with the strengths, weaknesses, or even your choices for some of the awards that we'll get into in a second. But I can't help but think. So I've been listening to the Last Fan podcast, which is a wrestling podcast, but I can't help but think like Nintendo is very much like the WWF of video games. It brought video games into the mainstream. Mario, of course, is the Hulk Hogan equivalent. Even Mario gets a little racist. I guess Mario himself doesn't get, yeah, because he's the one that wears the sombrero. So Mario gets a little racist, just like Hulk Hogan. Luigi is like his big boss man, Jim Duggan, Hillbilly Jim. Like this metaphor really works, and of course Bowser is a slightly less charismatic version of Roddy Piper. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And the wrestling connections will only continue as we go into next week.
Absolutely. So let's get to the awards really quick. Have you heard of a movie called Little Nemo in Slumberland?
This sounds vaguely familiar. Like I probably have heard of it. Again, when it comes to like Japanese anime and animation, I'm not as well versed.
So surprisingly, a bunch of my friends have seen this movie when they released it in the United States on VHS in like 1990, 91. I wanted to shout out this movie because it's kind of like one of those like sleeper cult classics of like animated kids movies from that era, and it's not really like picked up upon, but they did make an NES video game out of it. Masami Hata is the director of this Mario anime. He also directed Little Nemo and Slumberland, so that's kind of that connection there. And I know people like love that because Netflix has done a live action remake, right? Have you heard about that?
I have not.
Okay, so yeah, they're doing a live action. I think Jason Momoa is in it. So there you go, people. Everything's kind of connected now, and we're connected to Netflix. But that's the connection I got you for there. For that's my MVP. He's the director of the movie, and he kind of structured it all together. And I think he's probably the one that was the definitely the MVP putting it all together. Best performance, I'm gonna go with the voice of King Koopa. His name is Akiko Wada. And like I mentioned before, that scene with Princess Peach kind of cemented it for me because he's able to go playful as like the teddy bear and like playful because he's trying to get, he's trying to warm up Princess Peach to liking him. And then he goes back to being an asshole Bowser with that dark, grungy voice. So I like that range that he gave in the span of 2 minutes. And it made me think like Bowser can be much better or not live action, but like, animated movie villain. It could be a better version of that than I thought it could be.
Yeah, I don't really disagree with you on either count. I think that in terms of performances, yeah, Bowser was definitely pretty entertaining, and yeah, the Luigi performance is probably what worked the least. It was so weird. Like even the performance was weird, and I wasn't into it. Also, shout out to a princess for just the way she shouted Mario. Just again, will stick with me until the end of time.
For sure. And then this one she's blonde, and I guess they make her a redhead towards later on in the games in the movie. So that's kind of the interesting
Maybe strawberry
transformation.
blonde.
Oh, there you go. But yeah, that's it for this episode. It's a kind of a shorter episode because this movie was only an hour, but we highly recommend it. Just type in Mario anime on YouTube. You can find it easily. You can find like the version that was released 10 years ago and the version that was released in 2021. That 4K, that's kind of 1080, but it's definitely worth checking out. And I would actually recommend watching it before, like I don't know, the hour before you watch the new movie coming out, because I think you'll be surprised at how similar they are, and yet just kind of like wow, like we could have had this movie years ago, but they decided to do that live action bullshit that we can talk about in 3 weeks. So that's it for this week, and we'll be talking to you next week about the live, or not the live, but the Mario animated shows that spanned it from like 1989 to 93, and it's 3 different shows, and it's going to be exciting. It's got wrestling references, so we'll be talking about that next week.